Welcome to Modular Games, everybody. My name's Kyle, and today I want to talk to you about this book, Shatterscape. This is my book that's currently on Kickstarter, and in particular, I want to talk to you about one of the optional add-ons, the item cards that are available. These item cards are designed to be compatible with any rule system, and that's why on the cards it will say things like, under such and such circumstances, your opponent will suffer fear, or you will trip your opponent. It doesn't list the mechanics. It depends on the mechanics of the native game. If your game allows a saving throw to prevent this from happening, that happens. If your game says that it happens automatically, it does. If your game has an opposed roll, that's exactly how it works. I can't list that out on the cards because their cards are rules agnostic, mostly. Now, before I go into any of the individual cards that are available, I should talk about how to read the cards. So here's an example right here. This is the dagger. You'll notice at the very top of the card, there is the name, and then a little bit below that on the right-hand side, you'll see the damage values, and then you will see a couple of items, or in this case, 0 items, before the proficiency line, and a few items after the proficiency line. And then on the side of the card, it tells you how many hands it takes to wield the weapon, it tells you what category it falls into, and so forth, including the durability rating. Now, one of the core things to understand for these item cards is that if you are proficient with the item, you get to use all the special abilities listed on the card. But if you're not proficient with the item, you can still use it, but you don't get any of the benefits listed under the word proficiency. It's in different fonts, so it should stand out a little bit. Now, on to this specific card. This weapon is actually one of the most effective and most lethal weapons that I have released. And that is because if you are grappling your target, you get to completely ignore part of your opponent's armor. Half of your opponent's armor completely disappears while you're grappling them. Now, as a little bit of a spoiler, there's also a rule that I've suggested that if you have advantage on the attack, whatever that means in your system, then you'll also ignore half of your opponent's armor. So if you have both of those conditions, then you deal full damage even if they have damage reduction of 10 or 12 or 100 from their armor. Or if you have armor as an adjustment to the AC or dodge rating in your game, then guess what? You're going to more or less automatically hit people in heavy armor because they depend entirely on the armor and not on their dexterity or anything else to defend them. So using the dagger lets you completely ignore most of those defenses. Also, the dagger specifically mentions that it's easy to hide and so on. Next item. This is another melee item, and it is one of my personal favorites, the flail. Now, some people have really hated on the flail because it's not a battlefield weapon. But in the context that it was used for, it was horrifyingly effective. You can see that here. It deals 2d4 damage, which is not a lot of damage. And it also has a special effect that if you're proficient with the weapon and you score a critical hit or you kill the target, you're going to inflict fear on several enemies that are close by to you. You could imagine swinging a flail around, a cat of 9 tails. These cords are coated with blood. They're flinging droplets of blood 10 or 15 feet away. That's absolutely horrifying. And that's generally what the mechanics of this card are accomplishing. But I would point out another thing, because in accordance with the rules that these cards are designed for, the damage reduction from armor is going to apply once for each die of damage dealt by the weapon, which means that if you have damage reduction of 3 with the flail, well, you now have damage reduction of 6. The damage reduction for armor is going to apply twice as much against this weapon because you're rolling 2 dice instead of 1. And if you were rolling 3 dice instead of 1, that armor would apply against your attack 3 times, very easily reducing damage to 0. Now, since we're talking about armor, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of examples of armor. 2 of the most common armors that you are going to see are going to be the gambeson and the breastplate. We'll cover the breastplate first because it's simpler. The breastplate is a fairly common medium type armor that covers your chest area. It's made of steel, it defends you very well, it's iconic, people know what it is. This is going to give you damage reduction, and as noted in that top space on the card. However, you can see that above the proficiency line, there's a little interesting note. It says critical vulnerability, which means that if you are struck by a critical hit, this damage reduction will not apply at all. And that is something that is very important for a breastplate. However, the breastplate also has the impervious property, which references the rules that I just told you about with the flail, and that is that half of the damage dealt to you while you are wearing a breastplate is going to be converted to bludgeoning damage. So, if your opponent attacks you with a slashing or piercing weapon, half of that damage gets converted into bludgeoning, which means that your damage reduction from the breastplate gets doubled against those attacks. But what if you get attacked with a hammer, something that's already bludgeoning? Well, you don't get to double your damage reduction, which means that a warhammer can really cause you to have a hard time when you're wearing a breastplate or full plate armor or anything else that has the impervious property. Now, the other armor that I want to point out is the gambeson. This is a historical type of armor that's not well supported in most role-playing games. Role-playing games will often call this padded armor, and it'll grant a +1 to your armor class, if that. But looking over it, it seems that historically this armor was used in conjunction with other armor. So I wanted to have a mechanic that's a little bit different, that stacks with whatever else you have. So instead of adding more damage reduction, why not give a few points of bonus health? Okay, cool. So the bonus health on here is assuming a low health character, someone that has maybe 5 to 20 hit points total. If you're running a campaign where, well, let's say standard D&D rules, you have 1d8 health per level and you're level 10, you could easily have 30, 40, 50 health. Maybe the gambeson gives you +2 health per character level if you're proficient in it, or if you're not proficient in it, it just gives you 5. That sounds pretty nice. And the fact that you can get this bonus health back anytime you complete a short rest means that pretty much everybody is going to want this. And it's light armor. So I think it should serve as a pretty satisfying item. Leave comments below, because this is a bit of a unique mechanic. Let me know what you think about it. Now, a few more notes. I'm not going to go over the specifics of a lot of different cards, but a few more examples. A shield, for example, is actually classified as a type of weapon where instead of dealing damage, you're going to reduce damage to yourself, often as a reaction. There's also a shield wall action, which requires a battle mat and stops attacks from a certain direction. There is a tent, which says you're automatically going to be immune to environmental effects while you sleep. Cool. What about medical items? Well, medical items are not really addressed in a lot of games, and then in some other games, they'll be very, very detailed. Instead of having a standard medical kit, I've broken it up into 5 different medical items. The first medical item is bandages. Bandages allow you to stop bleeding, or if the person using the bandages is proficient, it can actually restore some amount of health. Second, we have pain suppressants. Pain suppressants allow you to keep going despite the fact that you're injured. Third, we have an antitoxin. Let's say you get poisoned. Let's say you get bit by a rattlesnake. This is what you use to fix that. Well, what if it's not poison? What if you're diseased? Right here, we have antibiotics. And the 5th option is, now what was that 5th option? And the 5th item is a stimulant. This is technically not a form of medicine, but it is a medical item that can have consequences when misused. So proficiency in medicine is very useful when you're administering this item. Now, I think you agree, well, I think that many people will agree with me that this completely changes the way mundane, non-magical healing is going to work in a game. It creates a very strong expectation that you're going to be using mundane items to solve these problems. And one of your party members might want to specialize in medicine just to patch people up. It could be just as effective as magic. Almost. Like and subscribe to the video, leave a comment below like I've mentioned, share the video with somebody that you like because I'm sure they'd appreciate it too. See you guys next time.